What's happening, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks for joining me today. And I figured today what I would kind of do is just kind of recap what's been going on most recently with the Aaron Rodgers saga. And I know all of us to some extent have probably a little bit of Aaron Rodgers overload at this point, and I think everyone just wants to know what's going to happen next. But I think there have been some at least interesting developments over the course of the past week where if you group them together, maybe we can start putting together the puzzle pieces and kind of reading to the tea leaves a little bit, and just kind of wanted to recap everything that's gone on. So, of course, Aaron Rodgers had the big match, a week ago, and then he also played in a golf tournament in Tahoe after that. And then I'm sure you've heard his comments by now. When asked about the situation, he said, in quote, "I'm going to enjoy the hell out of this week, and then I'm going to get back to working out and figure things out in a couple weeks." So a couple weeks is relevant here, right? Because when he said that, a couple weeks is basically the start of training camp and when he'd have to report to training camp. So he knows that day is in his mind. And to me, the tell here is that, he said he's going to figure things out in a couple weeks. And he's going to get back to working out is another tell. Now, Aaron Rodgers is an athlete, whether he's playing golf, football, whatever. So he's going to be working out in some capacity, probably regardless. But this had the connotation of working out in an effort to start getting ready to play football this season. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean football with the Green Bay Packers. This doesn't necessarily mean working out to an extreme extent that he's going to have to be playing football. But I think the overall connotation here is he's going to start getting ready for football, and then we'll see what happens in a couple weeks. And I just feel like the vagueness there continues to be the point from Aaron Rodgers. But I do think and I do believe that by not saying anything of I'm not going back to Green Bay or anything like that. And I know that, Mark Murphy has said the same thing where it makes sense for both sides not to say a whole heck of a lot at this point. Overall, I would take that comment from Aaron Rodgers as a positive sign more than I would a negative sign. It seems like he wants to play football. He's going to start working out, and he's going to start making a decision in a couple weeks, which, by the way, even if the decision in 2 weeks, if he made that decision in a couple weeks and the decision was retire or trade me, that's much better knowing at that point at the start of training camp that it's like done and he's not coming back and he's going to make a mess of the situation and demand a trade or retire or whatever the case may be. It's better to know that prior to the start of training camp or as soon as possible. So hopefully it doesn't just drag out and you have to figure out what's going on and things like that. So even if he makes that decision at that 2-week mark, that's still noteworthy because that's not something that necessarily has to happen. He could drag this out longer. It could go through training camp, and that becomes, I think, one of the worst case scenarios for the Packers. So overall, if you're kind of reading between the lines, I think what Aaron Rodgers said when he was in Tahoe was a good thing if you're one of the people that, of course, wants Aaron Rodgers back on the team. Then we had Adam Schefter. I know a lot of Packer fans' favorite person this offseason, but Adam Schefter goes on Chris Collinsworth's podcast and says, and kind of reiterates what he's been saying all along, this isn't a money issue. It's much deeper than that. He doesn't want to be there. So Schefter's sort of doubling down. And let's be fair here. Jay Glazer said something similar. This isn't just Adam Schefter. There have been other people who have reported this as well. But he continues to double down saying Aaron Rodgers does not want to be in Green Bay. And then he and Collinsworth sort of role played this worst case scenario for Green Bay and what Rodgers would need to say and do and things like that. Ultimately, you still have somebody in Adam Schefter who is very knowledgeable when it comes to NFL information, and he is saying Aaron Rodgers still does not want to be in Green Bay. So certainly not the most positive sign in that case. Now, dependent upon your belief in Schefter and his motives and, whatever, but it's noteworthy if nothing else. And I think that's the point here. So we've got the Rodgers comments in Tahoe, then you've got Schefter on Collinsworth, and then just recently you had AJ Hawk talking on the Pat McAfee show once again, who just spent a week with Aaron Rodgers in Montana. And these were some of the quotes from AJ Hawk. Quote, "He likes to compete. Does that look like a guy who's going to sit out and retire to you? Aaron looks great. He seems mentally in a good spot. What have I said from the start? I don't see him playing anywhere else. I don't see Green Bay trading him. I feel like he's going to be in Green Bay." And you have this interesting dynamic that's basically existed for over 2 months now, where the national reporters, the Glazers, the Rappaports, the Schefters, seem to mostly be on the same page of, hey, everything that we're getting, all of the accumulation of information is saying that Rodgers doesn't want to be in Green Bay. And I don't want to get into this in any great detail, but for anyone that's still saying this is just fake news or whatever, the Packers themselves have confirmed that this, in fact, was an issue. This isn't just a made-up story. The Packers have confirmed that there's an issue. Murphy and LaFleur and Gutekunst have gone down to visit Rodgers and talk things out. They've been very clear that, to some extent, the reporting on this is true and that there is a rift between the organization and Aaron Rodgers. So that's one side of things. Then you have all of the people that talk to Aaron Rodgers, the AJ Hawks, the James Joneses, the everyone else, right? Who seemingly are all on the same page that, hey, like, we all think Rodgers is going to come back and that he's going to be quarterback of the Packers this year. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a bit there, but like the Joneses and the Hawks and the people that seem to know Rodgers best on a personal level seem to be all saying the exact same things. Now, these are friends of Rodgers. So I don't think that you can necessarily say like this is just like state-sponsored Aaron Rodgers news and he's giving them talking points to say or whatever. I don't think that's the case, but he's still the gatekeeper of that information in regards to what he's telling them. And I'm sure that he's saying like, hey, don't say this, or whatever to these guys to make sure that they don't put their foot in their mouth or, end up creating an issue, whatever. So while I still tend to believe Hawk and Jones and those guys, I think you still have to know that information is coming from Rodgers, which is what you want, right? You want to hear what Aaron Rodgers is thinking. And if those guys are saying, hey, I think he's going to be back, that's obviously a great sign. And I think most Packer fans would say, hey, I'm going to take the word of AJ Hawk and James Jones over the Schefter, the Rappaport, and the Glazers and things like that. Right or wrong, I'm not saying we know at this point, but it's just really interesting that you have these two seemingly very competing views of what potentially is going to happen. Now, there is a world in which everything exists on the same playing field, right? And I think a lot of people have said this. There's a world where Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be back in Green Bay and is frustrated with the team, but still likes his coaches, still likes his teammates, still likes the fans, still likes the Pack, or like the Green Bay, whatever, like the tradition and history of the Packers, and that he's ultimately going to end up playing for Green Bay this season, even though he maybe doesn't want to be there and maybe is upset with upper management. All of those things can exist at the same time, and I think that's the most likely scenario. He's under contract. He's not going to retire. Green Bay's not going to trade him. He wants to play. In a way, his hands are tied. Like if he wants to play right now, it seems he's going to have to be a Green Bay Packer, at least unless something drastic changes. So I think all of these things that Rappaport and Schefter and Glazer and et cetera are reporting could very well still be correct, even with Jones and Hawk saying, hey, the most logical thing here is that he's going to end up still being a Green Bay Packer. All of those things can exist, but it's just interesting that you have these two very different dynamics. And then kind of the last thing that I wanted to go over, I thought a really great article by Justice Mosqueda, who writes for Acme Packing Company. And he wrote, and the name of the title of the article was, if Aaron Rodgers was leaving the Packers, we'd know by now. And I tend to agree with this. But, one of the big things that he pointed to in his article, and definitely go out and read it, I'm not going to give away everything here, but he wrote that Aaron Rodgers hasn't shown a commitment to making a mess at this point. And Schefter actually said something similar when he was talking with Collinsworth as well. But I think Justice is right here. If you want out of Green Bay, you've got to make this a messy situation. In a way, you've got to be the bad guy. And even thinking back to Brett Favre, and I know Ted Thompson took a lot of the bad guy, and like Favre just wanted to come back, but in order for Favre to get out, he had to make the situation messy. He had to say, hey, I'm coming back. I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to make this really uncomfortable for the Packers and Rodgers and everything. Like, he had to get that to a level of discomfort before Green Bay finally said, fine, we're sending you to the Jets. Rodgers at this point, to Justice's point, hasn't, at least that we know of, made anything messy or shown the commitment to making things messy. And going back to the title of that article, if Aaron Rodgers was leaving the Packers, we'd know by now. One of the other reasons I really agree with that is go back to what Tom Brady said about moving over to Tampa Bay last year. He said he didn't even have a really good grasp of the playbook until late in the season and they started going on their playoff run. He signed with the Buccaneers last year in March 20th. It is now almost July 20th, 4 months after the fact. After all of the, last year they obviously, the Bucs did have some in-person stuff, but no rookie mini camps, no OTAs, no things like that. And still though, Brady had the ability to meet with coaches, go through the playbook. If Rodgers were to go to another team, he now just lost, a bunch of time where if he was in fact demanding a trade and was going to make a mess and was going to get traded, he would have wanted it done months ago so he can start picking up a playbook, getting to know his teammates. Listen, Rodgers is insanely smart. And maybe he could go and pick up a playbook like no other and figure it out in no time. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. But you got to think that if he was really dead set on being with another team, he would have made this a much bigger issue by now and said, hey, I'm you need to trade me. I'm not playing for Green Bay, and really pushed the envelope with the Packers and made this a much messier situation, which, to Justice's point, he hasn't done yet. So I'm of the belief that the longer that this goes on, the more likely it is that he ends up quarterback for the Packers this season. Now, as I've said all along, him quarterbacking the Packers and him wanting to be the quarterback of the Packers are two very different things. And listen, even if he doesn't want to be here, even if he's unhappy, I still think, once you get in that locker room and you're back with Devontae and Mercedes Lewis and David Bakhtiari, it's not like Aaron Rodgers is just going to go out there and wing it and, be like, whatever. He's going to give it everything he has to the fans, to the city, to the history of the franchise, to his teammates, to his coaches, to go out and do everything. I don't think that this is a player or a person who's, going to half-ass it and just not go the full way and try to go out and win a Super Bowl. But if there's still that underlying frustration with management and there's still issues and, he wants out and he's, it seems like it's trending towards a trade next season, you do wonder if he's semi-disgruntled. It wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden, LaFleur calls a play he doesn't like and he tries to overshoot it. Or if in another situation where, LaFleur calls a field goal, does he try to keep the offense on the field? Those are the type of things that if he's not 100% all bought into everything that's going on, things can get a little wonky as well. So which is why I say there's a difference between him being in Green Bay and wanting to be in Green Bay. Overall, what's the end verdict here? We don't know that much more than we did, the last couple weeks, months, etc. I still think, as Justice pointed out, that the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that he's a Packer this upcoming season. But we're getting on the brink of training camp, and if we think that this has been a story up until this point, the story becomes magnified exponentially if he's not there day one of training camp. And even if in a couple weeks he decides that, I'm just going to end up playing this season in Green Bay, it doesn't mean that he reports to training camp right away. He could wait a few weeks. He could wait till preseason's done. There's still like a week and a half, 2 weeks between the last preseason game and the first regular season game. He could say, I'll take those 2 weeks to get reacclimated and everything like that. So this could be over soon. It could be far from over, and we don't know at this point. But I'm still Before I said I was 65% sure Rodgers would be the quarterback of the Packers, and I'm 0% confident in that. I'm going to bump that up. I'm going to say I'm 75% sure he's going to be the quarterback of the Packers, and I think I'm up to about 25% confidence in that. But we'll see what happens. A long way to go still before we potentially get to that end road. But as things look today and as things I think have gone on over this past week, I start feeling more and more confident that Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the Packers. So, of course, as you're listening to this, news is probably already broken that he's been traded to another team or he's retiring or something. But as I'm recording this now, it does feel a little bit more like he's going to be back in Green Bay. Only time will tell. We shall see. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a brand new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.